one last day of working on graphing or finding the roots so that we'll be able to graph parabolas next week. Enjoy.
So we're looking at day 2 of notes, and we're looking for the root of the parabola. The first thing it tells us to do is factor the equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 4 times 9 is 36. So we're looking for the numbers that multiply to 36 and add to 12. So I'm going to write my factors of 36, all of the numbers that multiply to 36, and that is 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. Then I'm going to add together each of those factors. So 1 plus 36 is 37, 2 plus 18 is 20, 3 plus 12 is 15, 4 plus 9 is 13, 6 plus 6 is 12. So I'm looking for the numbers that multiply to 36. Here's all of the possibilities that multiply to 36 and the numbers that add to 12. What numbers add to 12? 6 plus 6. So I'm going to replace this 12 with 6 plus 6 so that I have 4x squared plus 6x plus 6x plus 9. All I've done is I've replaced this 12x with 6x plus 6x to make it easy for us. Now it looks like something that we can factor by grouping. So we're going to put parentheses around this. And I'm going to put my x's above. So what is the highest number that can go into 4 and 6? If we look at our factor sheet, we see that the highest number that goes into both of those is a 2. I'm going to circle the number of x's I can pull out, which is 1. I've dealt with both my variables and my numbers, so now I can start my parentheses. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. I had 2 x's, I took 1 out, so now I have 1x, plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. Because of this plus, I add, what's the highest number that can go into both 6 and 9? That number would be a 3. I have no x's over my 9, so I cannot take an x out. 6 divided by 3 is 2. I had 1x that did not get used. Plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now let's look and see, do I have the same numbers or the same terms inside both of my parentheses? I sure do, which means that I'm going to write 2x plus 3. This 2x plus 3 is being multiplied by 2x. And this 2x plus 3 is being multiplied by 3. So I've factored my equation. Now it says set each factor to 0. So I'm going to write 2x plus 3 equals 0 and 2x plus 3 equals 0. Then the next part says to solve for x. So that means that I'm going to do 2x plus 3 equals 0. And I'm going to notice that I want to, since 3 is being added, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. So 3 minus 3 is a 0, so that I have 2x is equal to a negative 3. Then x is being multiplied by 2, which means I need to divide by 2. So that I will have x is equal to this 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. X is equal to a negative 3 halves. I'm going to look at my other term. I'm adding 3, so I need to subtract 3. So that I have 2x, this is a 0, 3 minus 3 becomes 0, is equal to a negative 3. X is being multiplied by 2, so I need to divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 becomes 1, so that I have x is equal to a negative 3 halves. Now we need to find the axis of symmetry. I'm going to rewrite our equation. 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. Remember that the axis of symmetry is negative b over 2. And b is our middle term. So that means that we have negative 12 over 2. Negative 12 divided by 2 is equal to a negative 6. Now I need to determine if the parabola is the direction of the parabola. The direction of the parabola, remember, is all based on our first number. Is the first number positive or negative? Since it's positive, the direction is up. If it was negative, it would be down like a frown. The final thing that we're looking to do is find our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is always our constant, the number without an x, and that is equal to 9. Okay, let's look at number 2. Number 2, the first thing it tells us to do is factor our equation. So we're going to multiply our outside two numbers. 5 times 12 is 60. We're also going to notice that there's a negative here. A negative times a negative is a positive. But what this means is that both of our terms are going to be negative. So we're going to look for all of the factors of 60. We're going to write down all of the numbers that multiply to 60. So all of the numbers that multiply to 60 are negative 1 and negative 60, a negative 2 and a negative 30, a negative 3 and a negative 20, a negative 4 and a negative 15, a negative 5 and a negative 12, a negative 6 and a negative 10. Now that I know all of the numbers that multiply to 60, I'm looking for the numbers that add to a negative 16. So I'm going to add these together. Negative 1 plus negative 60 is a negative 61. Negative 2 plus a negative 30 is a negative 32. Negative 3 plus a negative 20 is a negative 23. Negative 4 plus a negative 15 is a negative 19. Negative 5 plus a negative 12 is a negative 17. Negative 6 plus a negative 10 is a negative 16. So since I'm looking for the numbers that multiply to negative 16, I look over, or add to a negative 16, I look over here to see what they add to. And I can see that negative 6 plus negative 10 is equal to a negative 16. So I'm going to replace negative 16 with negative 6x and negative 10x. So I will have negative 5x squared minus 6x minus 10x plus 12. Negative 6x plus a negative 10x is equal to a negative 16x. We haven't changed the equation. We've just made it so that it's something we can work with. Now that it's four terms, let's factor by grouping. So, what number can go into both 5 and 6? Well, 5 is a prime number, so we know that only a 1 can go into both of those. I've written my x's up top to see how many x's I can take out. I notice that I have one x that I can take out. I've dealt with both my number and my variable, so now I can move on. 5 divided by 1 is 5. I had two x's. I took one out, so I have an x. Negative 6 divided by 1 is a minus 6. I had one x. I took one out, so that's the end. Now, because of this negative, I have to make a negative. What number can go into both 10 and 12? Remember, we're always looking for the highest number. So if we looked at our factor sheet, we would see that the highest number is 2. I don't have an x in both equations, so I can't take that out. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is a positive 5. I had an x and it stayed. Positive 12 divided by a negative 2 is going to be a negative 6. Now, are both of them the exact same? 5x minus 6 and 5x minus 6, they sure are. So that means that we can rewrite it as 5x minus 6. This 5x minus 6 is being multiplied by a 1x. And this 5x minus 6 is being multiplied by a negative 2. So now we are done factoring. The next thing it tells us to do is to set each factor equal to 0. So we're going to set each factor equal to 0. 5x minus 6 is equal to 0, and 1x minus 2 is equal to 0. Then it tells us to solve for x. So I'm going to rewrite this as 5x minus 6 equals 0, 1x minus 2 is equal to 0. So let's solve for x. The first thing that I have to do when I deal with my 5x minus 6 is I'm going to add 6 to both sides, so that I end up with 5x negative 6 plus 6 is a 0 is equal to 6. Then notice x is being multiplied by 5, so I have to divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so I end up with x is equal to 6 over 5. Now, let's look at our other factor. I have 1x minus 2, so I need to add 2 to both sides. So I have 1x negative 2 plus 2 is 0 equals 2, or x is equal to 2. Now it wants me to find my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to rewrite my equation up here so that I can see what I have. 5x squared minus 16x plus 12. To find my axis of symmetry, remember that it is negative b over 2. B is my middle term, the one that's next to x. So I will end up with negative 16 over 2. Remember that a negative times a negative is a positive. So that becomes a positive. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now we can plug this number in for our x's to find our vertex, which we will be doing next week. But for right now, I'm just reminding you how to find your axis of symmetry. We have to determine the direction of the parabola. Remember, the direction of the parabola is determined by the number in front of our x squared. If that number is positive, it is up. If it is negative, it is down. And the last thing we need to determine is our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is our constant, the number without an x, and that is 12.